Hey everyone, before we get started, just wanted to get this out of the way real quick. We do have to apologize because we had a couple of issues with the audio after we finished recording. You're going to notice a few hiccups and some audio crackles while you're listening to this episode. We promise, if this is your first time listening, that this is not the usual standard we have for our audio. We did everything we could to address it, but hopefully it's not too distracting and doesn't take away from what is otherwise, we think, a really great conversation about this movie and a couple other things we brought up during the show. So again, really sorry. We'll do our best to make sure this doesn't happen again, and hope you enjoy our review and more of The Woman King. All right, that's our review of The Woman King. Will, I had a really fun time talking about this movie with you.
Yeah, I did too.
You okay, Will? You look a little confused.
I guess so.
What's up? I mean, do you have a problem with the review we just had of The Woman King?
Well, I mean, maybe I missed something. I'm here talking to you about a movie that we haven't talked about yet.
This podcast is going at like 3 hours long at this point. But
oh, boy.
You don't think we talked enough about The Woman King, or?
All right, let's end this bit. Where are we going with this? I'm getting tired of this already.
Are you saying that this is revisionist history, Will Ashton, that I'm putting forward?
This is a new low for you, John.
Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, Major Motion Podcast, where we talk about the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm John Negroni, film editor for theyoungfolks.com and professional Will Ashton agitator. From Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he's a news and entertainment writer at Collider. It's Will Ashton.
Hello.
You can find more episodes of our show, all of our episodes, on cinemaholics.com. And we always love your emails. You want to say something to us, whatever it is. Our email is cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. We do read them, and we appreciate it whenever you hit us up.
We do. I'd like to see these emails. Where are these emails that we're getting?
Oh, yeah, we got one in a while.
Oh.
We might
Write
have
us an email.
Well, you know what? I'll double check. There might be a couple that I missed. That'd be sad.
Oh.
I was out of town for a while. I don't know, but
yeah.
I do check the email pretty often. So
do we get like screener requests or something? What do we get from the email?
Yeah, we get stuff like that. We also get like, quit your day job, do this full time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. The opposite of what you expect. Yeah. It's like,
right, yeah.
You guys aren't doing this enough. Make it a full-time daily thing.
I've actually, you know what? I have been asked like if Cinemaholics would ever be daily. Because people like our reviews, but that's a lot of work. A daily podcast? Come on.
What would be a day? Like, what would we do if we did daily? Just review multiple movies?
Probably. We'd probably review different movies throughout the week and then talk about the news and stuff.
Wow.
Because not enough people are doing that, talking about news.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if we were doing multiple days a week, we'd probably have time to talk about Clerks III, which you just watched.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, I know I was talking to Corey Woodruff, friend of the podcast, about potentially doing a bonus episode, but I can share my early thoughts. You haven't seen the film, if I'm not mistaken, right? You haven't even seen Clerks 2.
No, I've only seen the first Clerks. I've seen most of the Jay and Silent Bob stuff, like those Kevin Smith joints, like Chasing Amy and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and I've seen my fair share of Kevin Smith movies, but Clerks 2, for whatever reason, I just never got to.
I think Clerks 2 or Clerks 1 and then Clerks 2 were the first two I saw, if I recall correctly. But yeah, the View Askewverse is what you're referring to, which was put on hold for a long time until Jay and Silent Bob reboot brought it back. And then now this is supposedly the last installment of that cinematic universe before cinematic universes were a thing.
That's right. I mean, the first movie I saw from that universe was Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, then Chasing Amy, then Zack and Miri Make a Porno. And then I think I got to Clerks after that.
Zack and Miri was not in that universe. That's a separate film.
Well, was it? Because Muse was in it, so I thought that they counted that.
Well, Jeff Anderson's also in it, but they're not. No, they're playing separate characters from
I thought they still
Randall
counted it.
and Jay. Okay. No, it doesn't count. No.
I'm sorry for offending you.
No, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, you mentioned most of the movies that were in the View Askew-verse: Clerks, Mallrats, Chasing Amy, Dogma,
Haven't
Jay and
seen
Silent
Dogma.
Bob Strike. Well, Dogma's probably his best film. I'll say that on the mic.
Dang, and I haven't seen it. Oh man,
Dogma and Zach and Miri also hold a soft spot for it because they were both filmed, at least in part, in Pittsburgh.
Of course, that's all you care about.
Sure,
that's why it's the best one.
Dogma? No, I mean, I think it's also just the best written one of those. But anyway, Clerks III.
You're like, I think it's the best written. I mean, the part where it's like, this takes place in Pittsburgh. I mean, what a line of dialogue. Perfect.
It doesn't take place in Pittsburgh. It takes place in New Jersey, but it was filmed in part in Pittsburgh.
Okay. All right,
Zach and Miri does take place in Pittsburgh, and it was shot in Pittsburgh, though. But it's not part of the View Askew-verse. Anyway,
Clerks 3. We got all that out of the way. Clerks 3 just came out.
Yeah.
Which I know people have been talking about Clerks 3 for so long. I mean, before I was covering film.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say Kevin Smith has been talking about doing a Clerks 3 for I don't even know how long, probably since Clerks 2.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of those movies that's been kind of hyped almost to death at this point. Like,
I heard great stuff. I heard it's worth checking out if you're a fan of the universe.
I have mixed feelings. I'll say that. I want to save my kind of more in-depth thoughts. We do end up doing the bonus review, but because Corey was a big fan of it, and as you mentioned, it's gotten better reviews than I think most recent Kevin Smith films. Probably better than anything he's done since, I'll say, probably Red State, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I forgot about Red State,
which is also not in the View Askew-verse. Before you start saying that as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say I didn't finish that movie. I remember
I thought it was okay.
I got to the part where they get abducted, and then a couple things happened, and I was just like, I have better things to do with my time.
Did you see Tusk?
No, I haven't seen it. That's the one where Justin Long has like the podcast or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of the big podcast movies. Yeah, I think I
avoided that. I avoided that because of Red State.
Okay, I don't know. I go back and forth. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen both films, obviously, but I think I might prefer Tusk to Red State just for the audacity.
One day there will be a good and biting movie satirizing podcast in some way. It needs to happen.
Yeah, we need like an Ingrid Goes West of podcast movies or something. Yeah,
it's been lampooned pretty well in like some TV shows. Like I love it when people make fun of podcasts on TV shows, but it doesn't happen enough. I think because people are just like they're so afraid to offend. It's like, because there's so many industry people who do podcasts. So I get the sense sometimes that like whenever they like go after like they need to go after like the comedian podcast. I know we've done it before on this show, but. Sure.
I thought you were going to take like a right-wing turn here. It's just like they're too afraid to make fun of the media.
Yeah, cancel culture.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I don't even. Oh yeah, Clerks 3. We keep side tanging. Yeah.
Well,
so
you said you didn't want to talk about it until you talk about it with Corey, your best friend.
Well, I don't want to talk about it in depth. I mean, I'll just share kind of like some general thoughts, which is that I feel like I had a mixed reception to the film. I knew the reviews going in were more positive, but then there were also quite a few negative reviews that were talking about the things I was worried about, which is like the rehashing of a lot of the jokes, the kind of general laziness of Smith's filmmaking in recent years, this kind of sense that he's catering more towards the fans and to elevate his art or really kind of speak to any truth. And I think there's two sides to that. I think there is a lot to this film that really kind of bugs me in the same way that Jay and Silent Bob Reboot did. Like it is kind of cashing in on the nostalgia more than seeing Kevin Smith, really elevate himself as an artist at this point. Obviously, we're also seeing a film that is kind of doing this weird sort of meta narrative where it's the characters in Clerks making Clerks. And obviously the characters are mirroring what happened to Kevin Smith with his recent heart attack. I think that was 2018. So, I mean, there's stuff in there I find interesting and stuff in there that I find kind of tiresome. And I was mostly not with it until the end, which the end kind of won me around. Not enough for me to like say it's a good film, recommend it, but to make me appreciate, I think, the broad idea of what Kevin Smith wanted to do here. And I'll leave it at that until hopefully we have a bonus review, because I know Corey has a lot to say about it. I'm really interested to kind of pick his brain about what makes this film, in his view, one of the best Kevin Smith films. So, that's kind of my general thoughts on the film, and also, I guess, indirectly, my general thoughts on Kevin Smith's filmography. But yeah, I mean, I was curious to see it. I'm not mad I saw it, but I can't say I echo the the people who are saying this is Kevin Smith's best film in years, though I'm not going to say it's one of his worst either.
Yeah, I mean, I know a couple friends of the show saw it and really liked it. I'll say that. I saw Matt Donato liked it a lot, and Dan Murrell liked it a lot, so for me, it's like, I got to be in like the right mood to watch a Kevin Smith movie, honestly. And I don't even know what that mood is. It's like
being high.
No, I don't really watch movies high. I feel like I got to be like, I don't know, in like a very indie kind of like got nothing going on. But lately, I only have stuff going on, so I don't know. I'll have to investigate that for my own purposes. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, Kevin Smith is a guy who I think, generally speaking, at this point, has probably made more misses than hits, and I feel like a lot of his films, earlier films, don't hold up great. But I mean, he's an undeniably fascinating person. He is, a working class filmmaker who kind of hit on the scene at the right place, at the right time. Sundance in the early 90s, became a millionaire, based off of the successful film that he made in his early 20s for like $25,000. And, it's a remarkable story, though one that's been told several times at this point.
But he just seems like a genuinely like good person. Like, or at least somebody that like I'd be friends with, like I'd get a beer with that guy. I'd vote for him.
And speaking of podcasts, and undeniably, good speaker. I mean, he I think he's earnest. He's very sentimental. I think he's someone who, can speak from the heart in a way that doesn't feel false.
He's authentic. Did you ever watch that show that he did, Spoilers, back in like 2012?
Oh, we've talked about this, I think, often, like several times.
Have we talked about it? Okay. Yeah.
I'm sure we have, because that show is so funny to me, not in an intentional way. Because that was during his whole thing where he was like, it was after Cop Out, where he was just like, screw the critics. The critics don't like me. They never liked me. It's like, well, that's not true. Like, they were championing you. That one guy said you were going to be the next Martin Scorsese. He's like, nah, the critics are never on my side. The critics are never going to watch my movies again, and I'm going to make this new show where only the people, like general audiences, come and see the movies, and they were going to hear their reviews. And it was like, well, I don't know, like 30 random people in a room, and he's like, yeah, let's hear what the general people think of The Dark Knight Rises. Hey, ma'am, what did you think of it? Oh, yeah, it was okay.
Yeah, I mean, well, I remember the Dark Knight Rises one was interesting because that was the one where the shooting had happened. So they didn't really talk about the movie. They talked about like this, like what happened, kind of, or like the reaction to it. I think the one I remember was the Bourne Legacy. That was the one that I was like, okay, yeah.
What was that one?
He was asking questions like, do you think Jeremy Renner is a good replacement for this character compared to Matt Damon? And the guy was just like, I guess, yeah, sure. And I was just like,
yeah, it's just so funny because like I think the idea, there's something to it. Like obviously in our podcast we've kind of tried to like incorporate like regular people, like people that don't always go to movies as often as we do, just kind of like have a mix of like media perspectives and like kind of general audiences. I think that was
the conceit of the show at the very beginning when we had our third chair, and we were never able to find somebody else who wanted to do it.
Right, yeah, and obviously, like, I mean, Maverick.
Because as it turns out, Maverick was great, but like, it's hard to find somebody who goes from not watching like 3 movies a year to watching a movie every single week with us.
Yeah, it kind of defeats the the idea there inherently. But I mean,
we're going to turn a random person into a film critic, basically, was the conceit of the show.
But I mean, I think there is something to be said about like the idea of incorporating, someone who watched a lot of movies and have a conversation with someone who doesn't watch as much, but have a kind of, thoughtful, intellectual conversation, kind of hear from multiple perspectives. But his show was like, just like the people they got, from what I can remember, like weren't very like thoughtful in their critiques. Like they weren't really like saying anything too in depth. They just had very kind of surface level opinions. I don't know if that was just like a shyness to the camera or like the people they got, but it was a kind of just
can be done. There was a good version of this that happened like before Spoilers, and that was Movie Mob. You remember Movie Mob?
No.
Movie Mob was on the Reels channel. It came out in like the late aughts, and it's what launched the career, like the web career of the Black Nerd on YouTube. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he's like a pretty prominent film critic now. But he got his start on that show, and the way Movie Mob worked was you could like create a video, like they would send you money to watch a movie and you created a video like answering questions about the movie. And the whole idea was like you weren't a film critic, but you were trying to be entertaining and you had time to kind of prep for it. And then they would like splice the like clips of like you reviewing the movie with other people's clips and like questions that the host would prompt. And then every week people would get voted off. So like it was a constantly curated group basically. And so like the person who got the least amount of votes would like leave and they'd bring somebody else on. So eventually like you had like a list of people who were always on the show. Black Nerd was one of them. He became like a staple of it. And there were a few people on there. Like there were the Brit twins. I remember them because they showed up on the movie Gamer. So like it started to leak into like Hollywood for a while too. But then Reels Channel went through a bunch of stuff. They like changed the host out. They put in like awkward like commercials for it. It just didn't make money basically. And it fizzled out completely. But it was sad because I actually thought Movie Mob was a really good like concept and it was executed pretty well. But you know, and that was before it was like the last dying gasp of like cable, I guess, because like nobody had Reels Channel, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought that was like a YouTube thing. Like nope. I didn't even know what Reels Channel was.
I'll have to. You never watched Reels Channel?
Oh, no, yeah. I don't think so. I didn't have cable growing up.
It wasn't even cable. I think it was more like it was like a satellite kind of thing. So was that like?
Well, I definitely didn't have that.
I'll have to like send you a couple of links that explain the whole Reels Channel thing. It still exists today. Wow. And I think it actually, you know what, it is on cable as well. I'm seeing right here.
Oh, wow. What a time to be alive.
Yeah. It was cool. Yeah. They had like a whole TV series on Reels Channel called What It Takes. And it would take you on like profiles of like different actors and like their start. They were like mini documentaries, and it'd be like, hey, here's how Tom Hanks became an actor, and here's how like certain movies happened, and it was a really cool like thing. And you know, it was one of the things that like taught me a lot about like before I was like watching YouTube all the time, you know, or like you know before I was in college, and I learned a lot about the film industry through that channel. So. If anybody's ever listening to us and being like, you know, John really sounds like a corporate schmuck who just gets all his marching orders from big Hollywood. That's why.
Yeah, I like that we're covering every demographic here. The underspoken right, the outspoken left. Everybody's getting their time in the sun in this episode. Yeah, so check your local listings for the Reels Channel, I guess. And Spoilers with Kevin Smith, I think, was on Hulu. I don't even know if it's on there anymore.
No, I don't think so. But yeah, we are sponsored by Reels Channel. I should disclose that. No, we're not. That would be funny if like this episode was like for whatever reason, like the programmed ad at the beginning was for Reels Channel. That'd be awkward. I doubt that though. Okay, let's talk about our featured review. First movie of the week. Although we're not going to talk about Pearl, so it's just going to be this one. Should we quickly say about Pearl though that we're not covering it this week, but got good notices, and I do want to see it. It's got good reviews. It's the prequel to X, and I've heard from some people I trust. You know what? It's better than X, and I thought X was a solid time at the movies. But do you have an interest? Like, are you gonna like watch Pearl at some point, or are you just kind of like, you know what, X marked the spot for me?
I want to, yeah. I mean, at the very least, I might squeeze into October if I don't get a chance to check it out in the next week or so. It seems like a fun addition to my horror marathon coming up. So
sure,
I want to see it. It seems more up my alley than X. So I thought X was fine. I didn't dislike that film.
Yeah,
I don't think I thought it was solid. Yeah. My only concern is that they both seem very pache heavy, and I'm kind of worried from the like Technicolor angle, like, or not actual Technicolor, but they're trying to mimic Technicolor, that it might be more, I guess, superficial. But I have faith in Mia Goth as a actress and as a screenwriter. I believe this is her screenwriting debut as well. So
yeah, and I think Ty West is showing so much promise as a filmmaker with both these movies. And Maxine, which is going to be coming out, I think already it's coming out next year, I want to say, but yeah.
You mean Ma Triple X Ayin?
Yeah, there you go. Have you already seen memes with like, don't let Ma drink alone, like any of that stuff yet?
Not happen. With that film, but I mean, I remember the memes about Ma.
Oh, who could? I just looked it up, and Spoilers with Kevin Smith, you can still stream it on Hulu, and there actually were 2 seasons. They ran from 2012 to 2014. I thought it was a one and done, but what do I know?
They got more episodes than the animated Clerks show.
Did you ever see the animated Clerks? What?
No, I heard it's actually good.
Huh. That's
it's
fun.
The guy that like took over for Veep was like the co-creator of the animated Clerks show. One of the screenwriters, of course, of The Cat in the Hat, as well as a regular writer on Seinfeld and whatnot. He was like, I think, kind of like the main creative head outside of Kevin Smith for that show. And apparently, though it only ran for 6 episodes, some people will claim it's the best thing Kevin Smith ever did.
Interesting. Oh, all right. Well, let's not gracefully transition into our review of The Woman King. No way to segue.
Two very similar films, Clerks 3 and The Woman King.
Speaking of, director visioned movies, which that's not what you said. The Woman King. This is a historical epic action film. It is directed by Gina Prince-Bythewood. I know you and I had a bit of a, we had a bit of a debate when Prince-Bythewood's last movie came out. That was The Old Guard. Yeah. And, I came out to bat for it. I was like, you know what? She didn't write it like she did Love and Basketball and a couple of other movies before this, but she did direct it, and I was in the mainstream on that one. Like most critics were giving it good notices. I mean, there weren't a lot of people who were just like Old Guard, next generation, like great movie, perfect. There wasn't hyperbolic praise. There were a lot of people like me who were saying, this is a pretty, like, especially compared to other Netflix original movies, especially in the action, sort of light sci-fi speculative genre. This is really good stuff. And I certainly enjoyed it quite a bit. I thought it was really strong Charlize Theron performance, and I thought Prince-Bythewood's directing was really promising here. It's definitely something very different from what we've seen from her before. Her first movie, of course, as I mentioned, being Love and Basketball. Probably a more well-known film besides The Old Guard. That's just because of like recency bias. But you weren't the biggest fan of Old Guard. You said, you know what? It's old for a reason. It's old news, for me at least.
Yeah, I wasn't as crazy about it. I didn't hate it. I feel like it had a great premise. I like the idea behind it, sort of like this very kind of thoughtful look at like mortality and tackling the superhero genre from a more mature angle. I thought Charlize Theron was good. I thought Kiki Layne was good in it. There's at least one action scene I remember, like on a plane, that was pretty fun, especially like you said for a Netflix film. I just felt like the pacing of it was not particularly strong. I didn't find it. I found the execution to be kind of lacking in that. I think the ideas were strong. I think, as we'll discuss, Gina Prince-Bythewood is a very thoughtful filmmaker. I think she puts a lot of concentrated effort into making her characters and her worlds feel very fleshed out. I think she's very intricate and careful with that, but I just felt like that film, and you're telling a story about characters who have lived thousands and thousands of years, who are sort of almost indifferent to the ways of the world. And I get that that's hard to, I guess, transcribe in a very cinematic fashion, but I found it to be sorely a kind of drab and uninviting film. Like it's kind of hard with those type of characters to really make something that really pops, but I just found it to be not a particularly engaging film, unfortunately, despite having good things going for it.
Yeah, I mean, where I can almost meet you halfway there is that I think the weakest thing about the movie is the screenplay. But therein lies the main difference between that directorial effort and this new one from a different screenwriter. So The Woman King features screenwriter Dana Stevens. And I don't know how familiar you are with Dana Stevens' work, but has some is uncredited for a movie that I think not a lot of people are going to like when they hear, and that is The World Is Not Enough. The Pierce Brosnan's third James Bond film. Not his worst, but certainly not his best. Her most recent film was Fatherhood, which was that Kevin Hart movie that came out straight to Netflix, right? I want to say. That was a Netflix one, I want to say. Didn't see that. We didn't cover it on the show. She also did a movie called Safe Haven, which I remember seeing in the theater, and I thought it was horrendous. But that to me felt like, you know what? It's not really my kind of movie, you know?
Sure. Yeah. And I guess we should clarify, this is not Dana Stevens, the writer, I believe, for Slate, which was kind of confusing for me. I had to like double check to make sure that this like wasn't her screenwriting debut. But I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but
not
nevertheless. Okay.
So yeah, the confusion didn't happen for me, but I could see why it might be a little confusing for some. And then she has another film coming out with a screenwriter credit directed by Melanie Laurent, which I'm very much looking forward to, called The Nightingale. That's the one that has Elle Fanning and Dakota Fanning.
Dakota. Yeah.
Yeah, the Fanning sisters are back, and they're not taking any prisoners.
Yeah.
They might be the prisoners, for all I know.
Right. And did we talk about who wrote the story for the film, or one of the credited story writers?
For The Nightingale, or?
No, for The Woman King.
The Woman King. So I know the story also comes from Maria Bello. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was because that's the actress, right?
That's the actress who's been in one of the greatest comic book adaptations of all time in history of violence.
Yeah, Violence. Yeah, love that movie.
Yeah, absolutely love that movie. But she's been in some movies that I don't love. On top of that, but who cares?
Sure. But I mean, I just feel like she hasn't been in much recently. Maybe it's because she's transitioning behind the camera. But
she did some TV stuff that I didn't see myself because she was in that show Goliath, right?
If you say so.
But I guess that was a while ago, huh?
Was that the one with Billy Bob Thornton?
Yeah. I heard that was good, but and then I think she has another show that she's going to be in coming up soon. But I think it's a Netflix show. I don't remember what it is.
I know Amazon has popular shows that people watch. Like Marvelous Miss Maisel, which I watched the first season of, and there's like Jack Ryan, which obviously has a voluminous number of people watching. But you could tell me every single Amazon Prime show doesn't exist, and I'd believe you.
You're just like, oh yeah, you just made that up, and it sounds like something that might be true in an alternate universe.
Yeah, there's like 6 seasons of Goliath. It's like, yeah, sure, I guess, maybe. There's a Jack Reacher show, if you say so.
I know. I don't remember too much about that other movie. Remember The Waterman from a couple of years ago? She was in that too, wasn't she?
Oh, the one that David Oyelowo directed?
Yeah. I think you covered it at TIFF, and
that's right.
Seen it like a while before that. I don't remember how.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I thought I did. Maybe I'm confusing you with something else.
I think you're thinking of. Are you thinking of the one that had Angelina Jolie in it? That the director of Brave did. That went to Sundance.
Yeah. It was like Come Away or something like that. Yeah. Okay, I'm confusing it. Never mind.
Yeah, I thought that's what you were. Yeah, kind of. They both had to deal with like fairy tales and like using them to kind of mask pain and all that stuff. Neither were great films. I think Waterman was maybe a little bit better than Come Away, but neither I can really, recommend in full. But was she in that? Was she like a ranger or something in that movie?
She was she was Sheriff Goodwin, according to my notes here. So.
Yeah, I guess that would have been the last thing I've seen her in. Yeah, I just feel like I haven't seen her in much recently. So I was heartened when I saw that she was a credited screenwriter in this film. I was like, good for her. I hope more good things are coming her way.
Agreed there. We're Bello fans over here. Now, this movie has quite a cast. The two heavy hitters, or there are 3 heavy hitters, but the 3 most recognizable faces, for sure, are Viola Davis, who absolutely leads the film. We also have John Boyega, and we have Lashana Lynch. Terrific, I think, trifecta there. But then we have this newcomer in this movie, Thuso Mbedu. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Probably not. But she is a South African actress who, for sure, has quite an entrance in this movie. I think this is her first movie ever. I think she's done TV before this, best known for like the Underground Railroad. But in terms of film, she is coming onto the scene in a big way with this movie because The Woman King doing pretty well at the box office, definitely getting some high notices. It's a historical sort of, I want to say it's like retelling kind of, it's historical fiction, but it's borrowing from certain things that happened very loosely. It's set in the 1820s. The film follows Viola Davis as the general of this female-led warrior group known as the Agoge. I think that's how they said it, right? And they're very strong warriors, but they have to like renounce. They can't have families, they can't get married and have children. They're kind of like in medieval sort of like societies, like if you were like a king's guard or something, you had to like take note, you had to renounce your titles. Like Game of Thrones has a whole thing where they use that from history and stuff. It's that kind of idea, but it's in an African tribal society that is kind of like the slave trade is still a thing, but it of course is like starting to like phase out in the Western sort of empire, I guess, because this is the heat of the British Empire, of course. And one thing that surprised me about this movie is that it is a very like it's a very standard sort of coming of age kind of thing, where we have like the new recruit played by Thuso Mbedu, who comes into this warrior society, kind of learns the ropes. She's a bit of a rebel, and she clashes, of course, with her superiors. There's a plot going on in the background, of course, of war that's kind of brewing. My least favorite thing about this movie, by the way, is the opening exposition, where they have all the titles come up of like, here's what's going on. These people are at war with these people. None of that was helpful. I was totally thrown off and confused. But the rest of the movie did a fine job explaining like what was going on. So I thought that was pointless. Like, handled very poorly, I think.
I was wondering about that. You think that was like a test audience thing?
It had to be, right?
Audiences were like, I'm confused. Like, what's all of this about?
Yeah.
And it's like, they're like, you got to write some things so people don't get confused. But yeah, I didn't really feel like it didn't say anything that wasn't already kind of apparent as the film went along.
Right. There were a lot of times in this movie where I wasn't fully understanding all the politics of what was happening. I didn't fully understand all the dynamics between the different factions, why certain characters were doing this or saying this or gunning for this, or why were they able to be in this area. But at the same time, most of I just didn't really care that much, because I think like all the politics and stuff in this movie is just kind of like a plot device. It's just supposed to try to get you to the parts that are exciting. Ultimately, this is more of a character movie. Characters you've seen before in other movies, but the execution, I think, is where this movie kind of thrives. It is really satisfying. It's just a satisfying story on every level, I think, in terms of like the kind of movies that sort of, it doesn't try or do anything all that innovative, except that like we just don't see a lot of movies with this kind of setting. We have seen movies with this kind of story, with these kinds of characters, but I think this movie has some surprises too on top of that. It's not totally formulaic. So I'm a fan of this movie, but what about you? Well, do you like the woman king, or are you saying down with the monarchy?
Yeah, I mean, certainly compared to the old guard, I'm coming out of this one a lot more favorable. Yeah, as you were kind of alluding to, there is something kind of special about how this movie at once feels like an old-fashioned sort of blockbuster, but obviously the type of film that, you know, probably wouldn't have gotten greenlit, unfortunately, until like the last 5 years or so, probably based off the success of Black Panther. It just seems like the type of film that, you know, thankfully, you know, there's still a lot of steps to go, but we are in a more sort of progressive state where we can see movies like this really come out and hopefully thrive. I mean, it seems like it's doing okay at the box office, not like amazing, but enough to like, you know, show promise, and hopefully word of mouth can kind of elevate it as it goes along as well. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm not maybe as high as you are on the film, but I'm digging it. I like it. I think, as I was saying before, I really enjoy how much thought and care was put into a blockbuster like this. Is clearly a very thoughtful thematic film in a way that I feel like we very rarely get on this scale and on this size. Like, it seems like, you know, Prince-Bythewood really put a lot of care into developing the dynamics of the characters, just the stakes and the world, the politics of it, as you mentioned, and also just like allowing the actresses to really thrive. As seen, certainly, obviously, we know that Viola Davis in the lead is going to give a great performance, not only emotionally but like physically. It's clear that she put a lot of work into, you know, making and selling the action scenes work really well, and I think that's certainly a credit to her commitment and talent. But and I'm probably going to butcher her name, unfortunately. But Thuso Mbedu?
I think it's, and again, I'm probably not getting this right either, but I think it's Thuso Mbedu.
It's Thuso Mbedu. Okay.
It's my best guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think she was in the Underground Railroad.
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier.
Okay, yeah. I feel bad for joking about Amazon Prime, because I had heard that's really good and I haven't seen it yet. But
yeah, one of the best reviewed series of, I think, 2021, I want to say.
Yeah, and I've heard it's great. And I think she's, if not the lead, one of the main leads in that show, and I've heard she was great in that. And I think there's undeniable star presence to her in this film. Like, there's, you know, like a strength, but there's also a clear vulnerability, not only from her age, but just like the way she can integrate this character with a sense of like an emotional core, a sense of openness, but also a resistance to kind of welcome people into her lives. That seems to be a common.
Do you know how old she is?
Like 19?
No, she's 31.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. She's older than me. Oh, wow.
She looks very young for her age. That is for sure. But she's not that young. No, she's about my age.
Well, how about that? Good for her. That should help her out in the days and years ahead, hopefully. But
okay.
I don't know. I mean, it will help her get roles. I mean, Hollywood does cater to younger characters, so
absolutely.
Yeah. In any case, yeah. I kind of lost my train of thought there, but I dug the film. No, you're good.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I did want to bring up too with this movie is that because you kind of I saw some people sort of saying like, oh, this is a response to Black Panther, but be clear that that's not how this movie came about. The movie was originally pitched in 2015. I think it was Maria Bello herself who originally pitched the idea to Viola Davis about it, and so. To what you were saying, though, it was the success of Black Panther that, kind of got everybody to say, hey, we can do this. Like, we can make a movie like this. Yeah, that's what you were saying. And I think some people have gotten the false impression behind that of saying, like, oh, after Black Panther came out, this was sort of like a cash grab sort of thing. Like, oh, let's capitalize on the success of that movie, especially on the lead up to Wakanda Forever, which comes out later this year, which I saw the trailer for the first time, by the way. And hype is real. Yeah. But yeah, so all that to say, I think that this was definitely a movie that was long in the works, and it does owe a debt to Black Panther, kind of paving the way for that movie is African futurism. This movie, of course, is going after something different, but it has very similar, in terms of superficial stuff in similarities, the kind of action movie vibe. It does have this sort of the PG-13 action scenes, the sort of attention to detail, the tribal life, but obviously similar to Black Panther, it's had a little bit of, some debate around its themes and, sort of how it's telling a story as it relates to real life. I've seen some criticism, some, valid criticism.
I was going to bring that up. I mean, obviously, I think they even said it's a fairly loose depiction. Yeah. I mean, obviously, this isn't the type of film where you watch it for historical accuracy, which I mean, I'm kind of the opinion that it is in some respects painting a false image, but also you watch a movie like Braveheart or something, I feel like people don't bring the
Braveheart, Last of Mohicans,
or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I mean, I feel like
Gladiator.
This is kind of sure. Yeah, it's I mean, not that the criticism isn't warranted, but I feel like it can get kind of harped on in with this type of film in a way that I don't know if it's fully justified.
I don't think it's fully justified. I've seen people go a little too far where they've kind of tried to make it sound like the movie doesn't address the role that this kingdom had in slavery at all. But the movie does point it out. The movie is kind of clear that this was a kingdom that had a role in slavery, but there was doubt, of course, and there was conflict between literally characters in this about that. And so that to me was I think you can still have a valid criticism of how they handle that, but I don't think it's fair at all to say that the movie doesn't even bring it up or over glamorizes that whole community, basically.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, I feel like the movie, and obviously I can tell from the marketing. I guess if you focus on that more, it is kind of focusing on the action and violence as you expect. So if people would think it's downplayed, but yeah, there are several scenes in this movie where they talk about that. Maybe not in full depth, but enough to where it's more than you would expect, I think. And
if anything, because there are a couple of scenes where she's like, "Why would we have no slaves? Let's just palm oil." Just palm oil. There was a little bit of that where it was okay, obviously that's not how this went down. Obviously that's not how discussions of slavery and economics were had. Let's be real.
I guess where I kind of find myself maybe a little bit more negative or a little bit more critical is that while I do appreciate how much this movie is willing to just have let characters sit down and talk, I think that does kind of hinder the momentum in the middle chapter of the film. I think the first hour or so is really strong and moves at a good clip. It's good about building the world. It's good about letting us introduce ourselves into like the tribe, getting us to understand like what's going in from this new character's perspective. But then there's like a lot of scenes after that where it just kind of slows down and characters are just kind of talking, followed by another scene of characters talking. And I imagine you're going to disagree with me on this. That's fine. But I just feel like that kind of tampers with the momentum that starts the, I don't know. I just feel like it started to drag in certain segments in the middle for me.
I had different problems. That didn't bother me as much because I thought the dialogue was really crisp, and I was enjoying those scenes. I was enjoying this world as it was unfolding. I had more issues with like the more soap operatic, elements of this, like some things that happen with some characters that we won't give away, and just there were a couple things like that. I was like, you didn't really need that.
Where did you see on like the romance that kind of blooms midway through? I felt that was one of the weak. I felt like that was one of the weaker aspects of the film. Yeah, and I felt like those scenes like kind of checked out a little bit because it just felt very
forced and like
a little perfunctory to me in those moments. In a way, I felt like the movie was subverting, as you said, kind of tropes and expectations throughout, outside of having kind of a general kind of narrative arc, like a hero's journey-ish kind of thing.
Sure,
I felt like it was actually avoiding that for the better in a lot of respects until like that stuff where it just kind of felt like a little YA to me.
I did appreciate that. I think those moments don't overstay their welcome to what you're saying. I mean, it does go. There are other characters to like really click and connect with, and it wasn't a hard thing for me to get over. I think like I have a larger issue, like back to the slavery thing. Like I have a larger issue with slavery. I guess like I don't really like it when like this isn't a huge criticism, but like to me, I think that like there isn't enough recognition of like why slavery ended, and there seems to be this sort of like revision of like why it stopped or like why people got rid of it, and a lot of it wasn't because like because it's the right thing to do. Like no, people aren't good. Like people will suck. Like the main reason slavery ended in a lot of places or like that people were against it was because they were afraid of slave revolts, because they were afraid of like their lives and that they knew it was untenable, and like they were seeing what was happening in countries where the slaves were like revolting and killing their masters, and they didn't want that to happen to them. That I'm obviously painting a broad stroke, but like I just wish there was a little bit more honesty about that in media, and I think that like Hollywood isn't equipped to like actually address that at all. Like whenever you see like characters being like slavery is wrong because we're gonna die if we don't stop, like there was this sort of like self-interest wrapped up in it that's a little true to history, but at the same time, I mean, it's Hollywood. Like I don't have high expectations when it comes to the way they tell those stories, but I don't know. I wish I did.
I agree with that, but I think the movie, to its credit, I think it is able to be a little bit more murky about that and have characters who aren't like just solely like villainous. Like there's no like mustache twirling characters as much or as often. There's that
one character.
Well, I was gonna say I should have clarified. There's one, but at least like when it comes to the colonialists, they are willing to be a little bit more murky in a way I feel like other movies don't. Like they paint like you said, kind of a broader brush. And obviously, like it's a blockbuster, so it's not like it's going to be like it's not going to, develop things too far. And anything, I feel like maybe it's trying to tackle too much, which I think is a credit to Prince-Bythewood just having so much thoughts, having so many ideas, and wanting to explore so much with this world in a way that in a 2 hour or 135-minute film it can be, it's ultimately a little restrained in that respect. But I mean, I feel like I agree with you broadly, but I want to give her credit in that I think she is thoughtful about that, and it isn't trying to make it broad to the point where it's just like these are like obviously the deep villains outside of obviously, like you said, one or two primary antagonistic characters.
Sure. Yeah. Let's focus though on, I think, where Prince-Bythewood's strengths really are in this movie and in Old Guard, at least in my opinion, is that I just think that she's really, I think she's just good at connecting characters to action scenes and doing proper setup of like, here are the characters you're going to care about. Here are the characters you should be worried about. Maybe they're going to die. And if they do die, beyond sort of like, I'm sad that they're dead, like kind of exploring more of like the reaction of the characters who lose them a little bit, I think, more emotionally.
I would say the emotional stakes, what you're kind of referring
exactly.
to. Right, yeah.
I think she's good. Like, I think she's good at working with her screenwriters to sort of like bring out that emotion, through her actors, but also just like staging the film in a way where like when the action scenes happened, I genuinely was afraid for characters I was invested in, which is what I want. I want to care about them enough so that I'm genuinely nervous about like this person's fighting this person. Like, I don't know if they're going to make it. And so it's like stuff like that had me sort of feeling like, like I should be in my seat right now. And I don't get that from blockbusters very often. I didn't get that from Thor: Love and Thunder or like, Doctor Strange. And in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, like people were dying left and right. And I was a little bit like, oh, it was their time. Like it was a little weird actually.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that is certainly her strength as a budding, I guess, action director now with these two films. I guess for me, I was curious to hear about your thoughts on the action itself. I think she's really good about establishing scale and like kind of showcasing like kind of the scope of what's happening. I think she still has some trouble, in my opinion, and you might disagree. I think about hand-to-hand combat, like the action scenes still felt a little choppy to me in a way. Like not that I couldn't like tell. Sure. Yeah, it's not that it's like hard to follow, but it does feel like I would have preferred if she kind of let things play out in a way that felt more choreographed as opposed to kind of like cutting, like when the sword hit cut. It just felt like I feel like maybe that's just her coming into it with experience, but I feel like
some of that was the actors themselves, just maybe. Kind of and I didn't fault the movie that much for it. I thought with Lashana Lynch, they were able to really, like her and Sheila Atim, who's in this as well. I thought that their action scenes were a little bit more pronounced, a little bit more like they flowed pretty well. And Thuso Mbedu at the same, like here and there. But I think Mbedu and Viola Davis, like to what you're saying, yeah, there was a little bit of like, the Taken 3 kind of times. I guess it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not that bad, but I mean there's just a couple times where just like I just kind of wish this could breathe a little bit more in the shots. Like it just kind of felt like there was a little bit choppy in certain like sword fighting scenes in a way that felt a little underwhelming to me as far as like watching an action blockbuster is concerned. But I am glad that you brought up Lashana Lynch because I do think she gives one of the best performances in the film. Certainly. Sorry, Lashana Lynch. And it's really, I mean, one of the more emotional ones. And
my favorite character in this.
Yeah, I think it's a good showcase for her. I mean, she was in No Time to Die, obviously, and that was, like she was good in that too. But she's kind of like playing like fifth fiddle in that film, like
exactly. Yeah, I felt like that movie didn't do her a lot of favors, especially for all the controversy that it drummed up for her.
I guess
no reason.
I mean, yeah. I mean, well, there was going to be controversy, unfortunately, about that, no matter what. Yeah. But I
didn't get enough of her, and like, because she's been in a couple Marvel things, but it's like I don't know, she never gets to do that much. Like, she was in Captain Marvel. What did she do in Captain Marvel? I don't remember.
Yeah, she was. I think she was in Doctor Strange too, as well.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of quick though, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, she's an actress who I feel like I've seen in a number of things, and I feel like No Time to Die was the closest before this, so we've gotten, as far as blockbusters are concerned, to see her do something. But yeah, I just remember watching that film and be like, oh, like it's exciting. Like she's the film. What's she gonna do? She gets like maybe one action scene, and the rest she's just like in boardrooms talking with like Ralph Fiennes. And like that's kind of it in that movie. It's just unfortunate. I mean, maybe I'm misremembering it. It has been a little bit since I've seen that film, but yeah, I found it more refreshing to see her really get a character she can kind of chew on and spend more time and showcase her star power and screen presence in a very dynamic way.
Yeah, I mean, another element to this movie that we haven't touched on much here is that this movie also is kind of not a reaction to, but the filmmakers have come out and said that they've based some of the subject matters, some of the themes and the motifs of this movie around the Me Too movement. That was like when they were sort of developing the movie. Like I think they reference like specific things that happened with certain Supreme Court justices, for example. And there's like a sequence in this movie lightly depicting sexual assault, for example. And I thought a lot of that stuff, I certainly don't have a problem with it being part of the story, obviously, but I don't know. It felt to me like some of that stuff. I wanted maybe it's a little bit more exploration, I guess, and because there's something like I'd have to give certain things away, but like there's an implication that comes out of that the movie just never gets into. That I thought was like if you're gonna raise this, like if you're gonna go there, I don't know. It felt like a untapped potential. That's not the right phrase. I mean, it felt a little bit more of like you're just kind of glossing over actually something kind of major in a way that I thought was a little unsatisfying personally.
I don't know if I'd agree, only because I felt like there was a weight to it. Maybe that was Viola Davis's performance, but like it didn't feel like it was undercut, and it's so crucial to the story that it didn't feel like it was something that was just like haphazardly thrown into it.
I wouldn't say haphazardly. I think it was just like, it felt like they cut something out, maybe. That I felt like it was missing something. Maybe that's all it is. And it's not even something that I hold against the movie. It's just something that I'm kind of like, I don't know. I just wish that it was a little bit, I think it's such a delicate subject. It's such a touchy thing. And I don't think it really landed very hard, but maybe that, maybe that's just me. Maybe it did for a lot of other people. So
I don't know. I mean, could they have done more? Certainly, but I kind of applaud Gina Prince-Bythewood for having a story like that in a way that was like integral to the story, and I think it was sensitive to it. Like, it didn't feel exploitative to me. But also, I mean, it added to this character, and it added, obviously clear sympathy, but also like an emotional integrity to the character in a way that, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I guess got to push back and disagree ultimately.
I mean, I would ideally hope that that's what everybody gets away from the movie. Because I totally get the danger of it, that like it could have easily done way too much, and it would have felt exploitative, perhaps. But yeah, I don't know. It was just a reaction I had to the film that I couldn't quite put my finger on, like why, I had such a strong, issue with it as I did. But again, it wasn't that big of an issue.
I mean, it's certainly a tricky thing to include in like a film like this. Certainly like a film that's otherwise, while tackling heavy things at times is, a sprawling like action, swords and sandal kind of action movie in a way. So there is a trickiness. I think again it ties back to like what I said before about like, I think it's just the soap opera angle of it that just kind of, I don't know, I just didn't like. Yeah, and I think I don't know. I felt like it was a bigger issue in The Old Guard, but I feel like there can be some trouble as far as like incorporating the drama and the action. Like I just feel like the movie still with this one can be a little bit bogged down by like the dramatics of it in a way that the action scenes can seem a little too far in between at times. Certainly, I think in the middle, that was my issue, as I was mentioning, is that like it's a lot of talking. it's like several moments of characters talking, and I like the world building. I like the movie's willingness to have characters talk in such careful and thoughtful and mature ways. But yeah, I feel like there was, several points of film where it's just kind of like, all right, and it's another scene of characters talking.
Well, yeah, but yeah, to what you're saying, I appreciated the world building as well, and like, that there was like this subplot going on with like these princesses and like the king, and like I felt like they were able to weave a lot of that stuff in pretty gracefully. Like I was able to really get a sense of this place the way that I think the filmmakers intended, which I totally agree to the strong screenwriting here. So yeah, again, I can't emphasize enough that I just think this is like a really satisfying blockbuster. I mean, it's better than most, I can't say that it's like a cut above. It's, it's interesting because, this premiered at TIFF, great reviews at TIFF. Most people seem to be really liking this, critics and audiences, but hey, we'll find out when we play the Rotten Tomatoes game for sure. But one thing I have noticed is, like, it seems like the studio really wants to put, this is Sony, they really want to push this, I think, for, Best Picture or maybe some other Academy Awards, technicals and things like that. I don't know how strong of a chance it has at the Academy Awards, but, I don't think it's uncalled for. I mean, I think the movie certainly has a quality to it that is what the Academy responds to, I think, but who's to say? Is it going to be this year's Dune, you think? Or it gets like nominated for a bunch of things but doesn't win like much?
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I'm not seeing that right now.
It doesn't have to worry about Blonde, does it? Blonde and Don't Worry, Darling.
Well, certainly not that one, I guess.
There have been a lot of,
but I mean, I will sure. I mean, Blonde certainly. I feel like it's in the same camp as Whale. It just seems like everyone kind of has a different opinion on that film. But and weirdly, Clerks II.
Clerks III?
Sorry, Clerks III. Yeah. And Clerks II, I guess, to some respect. But yeah, I don't know what the award chances are. I haven't really thought about that too much. But I mean, like you were kind of alluding to earlier, I mean, it's going to have to compete with the Black Panther 2 and Avatar: The Way of Water, two action blockbusters that do supposedly have award chances, considering that their predecessors were also nominated for Best Picture. So I don't know. I mean, all three of these movies are, I guess, in contention, along with all the other movies that are coming out this year in the fall season. So, I guess we'll see. I'm not feeling like it's going to happen, but it's not an impossibility, to be sure.
All right, well, that is The Woman King. It's a little over 2 hours, and I certainly didn't feel it. 135 minutes. To me, it felt like more like right at 2 hours, so it didn't overstay its welcome for me, at least. And like I said before, it's doing pretty well. It's made $19 million at the box office so far. Really strong opening for a movie like this, which they needed because this is a $50 million budget. I think that if this does have like awards on its mind, it might be able to kind of have like a couple of Oscar boosts throughout the next several months. We'll have to wait and see, though, if that is actually going to be the case. Let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game. So, Will Ashton, I'm looking at the Rotten Tomatoes score right now for The Woman King. Did you say that you got spoiled on this, though, already? Or was it the cinema score?
I did get spoiled on the cinema score. I got an A+.
Okay.
Yeah,
I got spoiled on it, too. I saw it days ago, yeah.
I was going to say, it's I don't know if it's the only blockbuster, but I heard it was the only other film from 2022 to get an A+ score besides Top Gun Maverick.
I was going to say, it's like I feel like Top Gun Maverick's the only other movie this year that's gotten an A+. I'll double check that,
yeah.
But
yeah, I said in kind of wordy way, but
well,
yeah,
I think the only movies that've gotten an A+ have been blockbusters. I mean, most of the time that tends to be what it is, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is encouraging as far as like people. I mean, it seems like the audiences are responding to the film.
Yeah,
which is encouraging.
That is, I think, what these movies tend to be. Or tend to be geared toward, right? But yeah, Woman King, Top Gun Maverick, they're the only two movies of the year so far that've gotten an A+. Last year there were quite a few more. At least by this time in the year. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, American Underdog, Sing 2, Spider-Man No Way Home, Show Me the Father, and Summer of Soul. Which, Show Me the Father, I don't even know what that is. So that's
what's American Underdogs?
American Underdog? I know we didn't talk about it, but that was that sports movie with.
Is that the one Zachary Levi was in?
Yeah, Zachary. Yeah. I think it's about Kurt Warner, and it's about how he won the Super Bowl. Which Super Bowl was it? 34? I have to double check.
He's like a guy worked at a grocery store or something. And he's
right?
You should play football. Yeah, he's like, I can't play football.
Hey, got an A+.
I saw the trailer for that.
That is one of those movies that it's like the audience that comes out for it got exactly what they wanted. I mean, that's the case with Top Gun Maverick too, isn't it?
He prayed his way to the Super Bowl. That's all I assume it's religious. I don't know.
And an A+ cinema score. I don't know. Well, Dennis Quaid is in it too, right? So
is he? Okay.
I think so. All right, so you don't know what the Rotten Tomatoes score is for The Woman King. We have 136 reviews. Oh no.
Well, hang on. I didn't see the exact score, but I was looking at the Wikipedia for this, and I very briefly I saw it got 90 something. I didn't know. I don't know what the second part of it is, but I saw 90 something, and I scrolled real fast because I was like, I don't want to get spoiled for the Rotten Tomatoes game.
All right,
but I have 10 numbers to choose from, or 9 numbers.
Yeah, you
Sorry,
have
9
to
numbers.
get it spot on. So
I'm going to say 94%.
It is 10 numbers though, because 90 to 99, that's 10.
Okay, yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, sorry, math is not my strong suit.
Wait, what was your guess? I already forgot. Sorry.
It was 94%.
94%. Sorry, well, it's not spot on, which means I'm not giving you no credit. 95. You were one off. One off would be impressive if you didn't know it was in the 90s, but I don't know. You probably would have thought it was in the 90s anyway. But yeah, 95%, very, very high. I mean, that's high for certainly a blockbuster of the year. But most of them have been the 80s this year or lower. I think both of the Marvels were 70s, weren't they? Or I mean, I think maybe Doctor Strange was 80s. I don't remember at this point. But what about audience score? We have 1,000+ verified ratings. Where do you think audiences are on this one? I mean, the cinema score. Is that a hint, or is that going to throw you off?
Yeah, this one's going to be an honest to goodness guess because I have no idea. I'm going to say 84%.
So your guess is 84?
Yeah.
Nah, it's much, much higher. 99%.
Okay, I was kind of worried that, Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score has a bad history of, let's say, people with not the best faith takes can come in and kind of tamper with the score, if you know what I mean.
I'm looking right now at, just for the critic score, there are only 7 negative reviews at the time of this recording, and only 2 of those are from, well-known outlets. That would be Wall Street Journal and Slant Magazine. The rest are, I have no idea, what these outlets are. I don't think I've seen any of them ever. I mean, I guess I've seen fat guys at the movies, but just through Rotten Tomatoes. That is one of them.
And in general, maybe. I'm sure you've seen a portly guy at the movies before.
I mean, I certainly hope I have. But yeah, I mean, this is universally loved by basically everybody else. There you go. Okay, but what about Letterboxd? We have 8.6 thousand watches logged on Letterboxd as we record this. Not a ton for a blockbuster, that's for sure. Usually we see way higher, at least double that. But yeah, what do you think the average rating is from 0 to 5?
For Letterboxd, you said?
That's right.
3.8?
A little higher, 4.0.
Nice.
Yeah, not your best week, but you made a go of it.